All right, today we're going to be looking at something a little bit new. We are going to be looking at constructions. The supplies we need for this are our compass, which we use to draw circles and arcs. Our straight edge, we will be using a ruler, but we're not going to be using the measurements. And then you're going to need a writing utensil. So first, let's talk about what the parts of our compass are, right? You've got your needle. That's the point that's going to be anchored into the paper as you draw with your pencil side. You can also adjust the size, which changes the radius of the circle you're making. But the way I recommend using it is not by holding it at the top, but rather the side that you have it anchored on, you can either just wiggle that leg or you can rotate your paper. So whatever works best for you, you can figure it out as you go along. But those are the tools we're going to be using today to do these constructions. So the first thing we're going to do is copy a segment, meaning we're making a segment that's the same size. Again, we're not using the measurements that are on our ruler, but rather I'm just going to use it to make a straight line. And I need it to be longer than the segment I'm copying. So once I have my new line, what I'm going to do is take my compass and I'm going to put my needle on one of the end points, and I'm going to measure by putting the pencil at the other end point. Once I have set my compass to this size without changing it, I am going to put my needle somewhere on this new line and make an arc. I don't have to make a full circle, I'm just going to make an arc. And from that intersection point, I'm going to repeat. I'm going to put my needle at that intersection point and make an arc on the other end. And if I connect those two dots, then I now have copied my segment. So these two segments are congruent. Okay? If I know how to do that, then I can do it twice to add segments together. So I'm going to start with a line that's longer than both of them. I'm going to measure with my compass, putting the needle and the pencil at the end points. I'm going to copy the first segment. So there are two of those points. These two are congruent. Then I need to measure my second segment, and I'm going to start with my needle at the end of the first one I copied. So these two are congruent. And if all I do is just connect the end of my longer line now, I have added and created a third segment that's the length of these two together. Okay, I can not only copy segments, I can also copy angles. It's a little more involved, but again, I'm going to start with just a straight line over here. And I'm going to put an endpoint here. This is going to be the vertex of my new angle. So starting from the angle that I'm copying, I'm going to put my needle at the vertex, and the size of this arc doesn't matter, but you need to make sure you have an arc that will cross both sides of your original angle. So if it ends up being too large, it won't fit. You just need to shrink it a little bit to make sure it crosses at 2 points. Okay? So I've got my two intersections here and here. Then, without changing the size, so you want to make sure your compass is still the same size as that arc, you're going to put it at the vertex of what your new angle will be and make an arc the same size. Now, this is where you're going to change the size of your compass. From those two intersection points on your original angle, you're going to measure. And from that intersection on the new angle, I will draw an arc of that size. And this gives me a new intersection point that I will connect to the vertex. And I now have two angles that are the same size. They are congruent. I can do this again here with this obtuse angle. I'm going to start with a straight line. Making an arc from this vertex. I just need to make sure that it crosses through twice. And I'm going to make an arc the same size on the other angle. And I'm going to make this one pretty wide because I'm copying an obtuse angle. So from these two intersection points, I'm going to now measure and copy an arc the same size over here. From the vertex of that angle to that point, this is now my copied angle. And these two obtuse angles are the same size. Okay, if I can do that once, I can do it twice and add angles together. So I'm going to, again, start with a new line, and I'm just going to do this twice. So I'm going to call this one angle 1. There goes my pencil. I'm going to call this one angle 1 and this one angle 2. So I'm going to start with angle 1 first, getting an arc that sweeps through both sides. Copy it over here. Measure between those two intersections. And do the same thing here. Connecting those 2 points. I've now copied angle 1. Then I'm going to repeat that for angle 2. My vertex is over here. So a sweeping arc that covers, oops, slipped a little bit. A sweeping arc that covers both, and I'm just going to turn my paper there to make life a little easier. Here's the vertex of that angle. Then I'm going to measure from the two intersections. Put it here and here. Connect the dots. And I have now added those two angles. This one is the same size as angle 2. Okay, I can also bisect angles and segments. Bisecting a segment is actually pretty easy. You're going to take your compass, put your needle at one end point, and you're going to extend it beyond what the halfway point is. Then you're going to make an arc above and below your segment. Keeping it the same size, put the needle on the other end and do the same thing, above and below. Now that you have two intersection points, you are simply going to connect those two dots with your straight edge, and it has bisected the segment. But that's not all, it's also perpendicular to that segment. Bisecting an angle, a little bit different, but also quite easy. From my vertex, I'm going to make an arc that intersects both sides, similar to if I were to copy it. But this time, keeping my compass the same size, from each of those intersection points, I'm going to put an arc in the middle of my angle. And once I get that intersection point, I'm going to connect it to the vertex. And I now have a ray that has bisected my angle. Okay, I can split a segment into more than just two congruent parts. I can split it into as many as I'd like. For this one, we're just going to split it into 5. So what I'm going to do first is get a line going off this endpoint. And what I want is a line parallel going from the opposite endpoint. The way I'm going to make that happen is by copying this angle over here. So first, I get a sweeping arc, and I put the same one over here. Measure the distance between these two intersections and draw that from this intersection. Again, I'm going to just rotate my paper. Okay, connecting to that intersection is going to get me my parallel line. And what I'm going to do now to avoid confusion with the rest of this construction is erase everything I don't need at this point. So I've got my little lightning bolt, and what I'm going to do is, starting from this end, I need to make sure that whatever number of segments I am dividing this into, I'm going to fit one less arc than that. So if I want 5 congruent segments, I'm going to get 4 arcs, and if they don't fit the first time around, basically what you're going to need to do is start over and make it smaller. So I'm going to go 1 arc from end to end, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Then, keeping it the same size, I'm going to do the same thing on my other line. 1, end to end, 2, 3, and 4. So what I'm going to do with each of these points now is number them. So on the top line, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to go backwards from the bottom line. So that's going to be here, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now taking your straight edge again, you're going to connect your points that have the same numbers. So 1 goes to 1, 2 goes to 2, 3 goes to 3, and 4 goes to 4. What I now have are those division points on my original segment. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 congruent pieces. Okay, moving on, I am going to construct an equilateral triangle next. For this, you're going to start with a straight line along the bottom, and then taking your compass, whatever size you want it to be, just put your needle on one end and make a sweeping arc so that it goes above the line and crosses the line. Keeping your compass the same size, you're going to put your needle now on that overlap point and do the same thing so that it goes above the line and crosses the line. What you now have are the 3 vertices that will make up your equilateral triangle. So once you connect those 3 dots, you've got an equilateral triangle, which means all of its sides are the same length and all of its angles are the same size. And in an equilateral triangle, that means each of your angles will be 60 degrees because 180 divided by 3 is 60. So, knowing what we know now, how can I do each of these? Constructing a 45-degree angle. Well, if I can make a 90-degree angle, all I have to do is bisect that to get a 45-degree angle. How do I get a 90-degree angle? Well, if I make a perpendicular bisector of a segment, any segment, then I can find a right angle and then bisect it. So that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to make a segment and find its perpendicular bisector. Remember, that means you start with your needle at one end point, go more than halfway, make an arc above and below, go to your other end point, same thing, arc above and below. Connecting those two will get you the perpendicular bisector. This time, all I really care about the fact is that this is perpendicular, which means I have 4 right angles. Then I'm going to bisect one of those. I'm just going to go with the top right, and that'll get me a 45-degree angle. So to bisect an angle, starting at the vertex, make an arc. The size doesn't matter as long as it crosses the angle twice. And then keeping it the same size from those 2 intersections, you're going to make arcs in the middle of your angle. And then connecting that intersection to the vertex, bisect your angle, and you now have a 45-degree angle. Okay, if I wanted to construct a 30-degree angle, well, if I can start with a 60-degree angle and bisect it again, that would be 30 degrees. How can I start with a 60-degree angle? Well, if I make an equilateral triangle. So I'm going to do that first. Here's my line. Starting at any size, sweeping arc. Move to the other side, sweeping arc, and then you can connect those 3 points to get your equilateral triangle, which means you now have 3 60-degree angles, and all I need to do is bisect one of them. I'm going to bisect the top. So to bisect an angle, again, start at your vertex, get a sweeping arc that intersects both sides. Okay, the camera cut me off there, but basically what I did was I started at that vertex, I got my sweeping arc that went through both sides, then from each intersection point I got the 2 arcs, connected them, and that was your 30-degree angle. I will be continuing the rest in a second video because I am out of time.